Sorry about that, guys. Here we are. I am going to run you through analytical tasks 1 through 4 on this somewhat long sentence, but this one sentence is going to pull in a lot of the things that we've learned the first semester. So please bear with me and try to follow along. The sentence is, Amelia, grab the cookbook on the shelf, for there is a great recipe in it. Amelia, grab the cookbook on the shelf, for there is a great recipe in it. Okay, we have a lot going on here. So first we would do task 2, which is to check our mechanics. Does it have a subject? Yes. Does it have a predicate? Yes. Does it make complete sense? Yes. Does it begin with a capital letter? Yes. Is other punctuation and capitalization correct? I believe so. And is everything spelled correctly? I think so. So now we can move on to task 3, which is question confirmation. Well, it looks like we have multiple independent clauses here. I noticed right off the bat a fanboy, for, right? That's our first fanboy, for. And so I'm going to label that a coordinating conjunction, all right? And let's deal with the first independent clause. Amelia, grab the cookbook on the shelf. Who grabbed the cookbook on the shelf? Careful here. A lot of you wanted to say Amelia. It's actually not, okay? So why is that? Well, what is the purpose of this sentence? Grab the cookbook on the shelf. It's an imperative. It's a command. And what is the subject always in an imperative sentence? The implied you is always the subject in an imperative sentence. So there would be an implied you, and that is our subject pronoun. You grab the cookbook on the shelf because it's imperative. It's a command talking to you. You what? You grab. That's our verb. You grab what? You grab cookbook. Does cookbook receive the action of grab? It does. So that is cookbook is a direct object, which makes our verb transitive. We're going back a few weeks to when we did those. So we have some things labeled, but not all of them labeled. You grab which cookbook? The cookbook. The is an article adjective, so we label it as an adjective. What is Amelia then? If it's not the subject, what is it? It's a noun of direct address, an NDA. It's a noun of direct address. It shows who you are giving your imperative command to. Amelia, grab the cookbook. What else do we not have labeled in this first independent clause? This right here, right? On the shelf. Well, we recognize on as what? As a preposition from our preposition song. On, right? Or on. So on is a preposition. We label that PR, and we start our open parentheses right there because we know we're starting a prepositional phrase. Now remember, on what? On shelf. So shelf must be our object of the preposition. We label it OP and we put our closing parentheses. On which shelf? On the shelf, another article adjective. Okay, so we've labeled everything on the top there. What is our second independent clause? There is a great recipe in it. Okay, so whom or what is the clause about? What is? And this one is tricky. This is called an expletive sentence. So I have it on here so we can talk about it, but it's tricky, so bear with me. There, you might think there is the subject because it starts that independent clause, but it's not. There will never be the subject. We actually need to kind of rearrange this sentence to exclude what we call the expletive. Sometimes when we think of expletives, we think of bad words, but in this case, it just means something that is in a place it shouldn't be, technically, to see the subject more clearly. So if we were to rearrange this, we would say a great recipe is in it. And that I've taken out the there. So the original independent clause was there is a great recipe in it. And I switched it to a great recipe is in it. Now we can see that recipe is the subject. What is recipe is? That's the subject noun, okay? And we can just transfer that up here to the actual sentence, subject, noun. Recipe what? Recipe is, that's our verb. Recipe is what? Recipe, oh, I'm sorry. Recipe is great. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry, 1 second. I think I got confused here. So we have, there is no direct, oh, I'm sorry. So we have a verb here for is. Recipe what? Recipe is. And there's nothing, this here in it, just like here. What do we say in is? In is a preposition, so we would label in as a preposition, PR, and it as an object of the preposition, OP. Okay, so if this is a prepositional phrase, in it, we don't have anything following the verb that transfers the action, so it's actually a verb intransitive. Okay, now, which recipe? Great recipe. That answers the question. Which, it must be an adjective. Which great recipe? A great recipe. That's an indefinite article adjective, so we label that adjective as well. Now for the question of there. What is there doing in this clause? Well, it's that word I used earlier. It's an expletive. And it doesn't have a grammatical function. So how do we label it? We actually label it EXP for expletive. Okay? So we can erase the rewrite that we did because now we have successfully labeled everything. Whew, let's diagram it, okay? So I'm going to do our first independent clause on top. All right. Oh, we didn't classify it. I'm sorry, let's classify it. Well, this is, the structure is a compound because we have a fanboy. The purpose is a imperative because it's a command, grab the cookbook. And then the pattern, the first pattern, in first independent clause is an SVTDO, and the second pattern is an SVI. Okay, so now let's diagram it. First independent clause, remember it's the implied you for our subject, and then our verb is grab, and we're dealing with a direct object, so we do a vertical line that doesn't go through, and we do cookbook. Okay. All right. Now the noun of direct address, it actually goes on a floating hoverboard above the subject, so that's Amelia, right above the implied you, because it's not grammatically connected to the sentence. Okay. Now, we had some modifiers for cookbook. We had the. Now, what kind of prepositional phrase is this? Remember last week we talked a lot about is it adjectival or is it adverbial? Because that will depend on if we diagram it under the verb, that would be adverbial, or under a noun, because then it would be adjectival. Well, let's see. Amelia, grab the cookbook on the shelf. Which cookbook? The one on the shelf. So it's answering the question which is a question for adjectives. So we are going to diagram it underneath the direct object. So we have our preposition on the slanted line underneath, which is on, and then shelf is our object of the preposition. So it goes right there. And then we have a modifier for that, that's the. Okay, so that's the first independent clause. Now let's go down to the second independent clause. All right, so again, we're not just writing it in order. We have to figure out what was the subject. Recipe was the subject. What was the verb? Is was the verb. Okay, and there was nothing after it. So there's no direct object, there's no predicate adjective, there's no predicate nominative, so nothing after it. Now, with that said, we had some modifiers for recipe. One was a, and another was great. So they go on slanted lines underneath the word they modify. And then we had another prepositional phrase. So we had to determine again, in it, is that adjectival or adverbial? Let's figure it out. There is a great recipe in it. There is a great recipe where? There is a great recipe in it. That answered the question where, so that is a question that adverbs answer, so it must be adverbial, which means it gets diagrammed under the verb. Okay, so our preposition goes on the slanted line, in. Our object of the preposition goes on the horizontal line, it. Okay, now what do we do with this expletive there? That is just throwing us, isn't it? Again, expletives, like noun of direct addresses, aren't grammatically connected to the sentence. So they go on a hoverboard right above here, just like the noun of a direct address is. It goes up here and sits right up there. Now, we do have a coordinating conjunction that we have not attached yet, so it goes on a shelf in the middle of the two diagrams, and it gets connected to the verbs. Okay, so wow, there you go. That is a diagram that brought in our noun of direct address, a little explanation of expletives, prepositional phrases, different sentence patterns. So if you stuck with me that long, well done. So what should you work on at home? Really review Chart A. Really review the difference between SVLPN and SVLPA sentences. Sorry, let me look at my notes so I don't forget anything. Reviewing your preposition song is a great idea. And then, of course, memorizing the questions that an adjective answers and the question that an adverb answers is going to be extremely helpful for you. So again, next week is a celebration of everything that you have learned so far. And that actually, believe it or not, is a lot. In math, we had a fun time doing a variation on National Number Knockout called the Turkey Trot. So that was fun. In IEW, it was so neat to hear the students read their papers. They really had such a blast swinging back to the creative side of things. I was blown away by all of the dress-ups and decorations and number 2 prepositional openers that I heard. There are no new stylistic techniques this week to add, so just keep up with the same dress-ups that we've been doing. Remember, if you have 3 paragraphs, you need every dress-up in each paragraph, okay? But decorations are special. You only get 1 of each of those per paper. So our lesson this week is on page 123. It's lesson 14, Llama Saves the Day. It's the same format, so not a new structure either. It's the writing from pictures. So just as a reminder, writing from pictures, you have 3 pictures on your keyword outline, and each picture represents a different paragraph. And so you'll start with your central fact, which is essentially just a caption of exactly what is happening in the picture. And then on the 5 lines below that, you get to flesh that out, give background, give some character development. And if you're having a hard time figuring out what to write, you have these brain helping questions on the side here. So have fun with that. As I mentioned in my class, and I did not check with Mrs. Ellis to see if it was okay with her, but knowing her, I imagine it would be. I also suggested if your student would love to draw 3 pictures of their own or even have 3 photographs and then write their keyword outlines in their papers off of those, they are more than welcome to do that if they don't want to use the pictures in here, but that's your choice. You can use these or draw your own, or use photographs. But you really want them to be engaged in this. So again, always scale. I know it's a busy week with the holiday, so if you're not able to do all 3 paragraphs, that is understandable. Try to get those vocabulary words in there. And I think that is everything. So have a very, very happy Thanksgiving. And I look forward to celebrating with you all next week. Bye-bye.